Okay, we're back. We're live. Welcome to Dynasty Saturday Night 5, a Dynasty fantasy football podcast on the Going for Two live network. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you're listening on audio. And if you're watching here on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment on it, feed that algorithm, etc., etc. I'm Brian Ford here, as always, with my co-host, Josh Walker. Josh, how you doing?
I'm actually doing really good. This was the first Saturday in a while I got to wake up and watch football. We're still 1 week away from NFL, but at least getting to watch colleges. It's fun and a little exciting. And the weather actually cooled off, so it kind of lined up.
Yeah, it's we're in September. The sun's setting a little earlier. Got my windows open instead of the air conditioning. It's mixed for me, right? Because that means that it's usually going back to work time, but there's a longer story there that I'm going to tell you afterwards. And then also, it's about to be cold weather, and I effing hate the cold weather. So, it's very mixed for me. And honestly, I was talking to somebody last night, and they were like identifying with it. Like, part of me is like, you get football back, and that's really cool, right? But now, like, everything's weekly, and the turnaround is quick, and the waiver wires, and the setting the lineups, and like, there's like some stress involved to it, and it's like you've been arguing for months, and you kind of are sick, and you just want to see how things unfold, like, enough with the takes. Let's see what happens. But at the same time, it's like, now I gotta fucking do waivers every Tuesday.
Yeah. This is by far the most leagues I've ever been in, so I'm excited. But at the same time, I don't think I've been hit, like you said, with the wave of anxiety of probably missing a few teams through the week. But I did prioritize mine on Sleeper through like importance based on money. Scott Fishbowl's up at the top, things I don't want to miss, but I'm sure there's still going to be somewhere I miss, and I'm not ready for that, but I'm not even thinking about it. So.
Oh yeah, you were telling me in the Sleeper app you can rearrange the order they appear in or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you can do it on desktop, but you definitely can on the app. I know you don't use the app, but it might be worth downloading just to.
I'm on the app. I use it some. It just mostly on laptop because I'm old. Yeah,
I'll show you after how to do it.
Cool. I actually probably don't want to because I already have my spreadsheet set up in the order that it is on my desktop.
Yeah, probably throw you off.
Yeah. All right. Jamie's in the chat. Always good to see you, Jamie. How's it going? Toronto Dave. Always good to see Toronto Dave. Toronto Dave. You may or may not know that this is a holiday weekend here in the U.S. south of your border. Labor Day weekend. No U in labor, by the way. And it's kind of our shitty excuse for May Day, which is the real international workers' holiday. And it's kind of sad because May Day essentially kind of started, with us, like in Chicago, workers fighting for the 8-hour day, and the Haymarket incident and all that. And we just are like, nah, it's for commies. Let's do this stupid Labor Day thing. But anyway, welcome. Oh, it is a holiday weekend for Canada. What is it? You got to put that in the chat and tell us what it is.
Might be the same one. They just celebrated there too.
Huh, maybe. So for those of you who don't remember or are new to us, Dynasty Saturday Night 5, we use lists of 5 to be the vehicle for the topic we want to talk about in Dynasty at that particular week. He doesn't know what the holiday is. That's great. And so for this week, it's going to be fallers. And I was going to make Jeff proud and have like free fallen, like just the phrase free fallen from Tom Petty, like on a drop, like that I would play from my phone because he can't do it in Restream. But it was too much effort. So, but anyway, so that's going to be what we're covering tonight. We had some scheduling issues. If you tuned in and you're expecting Jacob Sanderson to be a guest, we had some scheduling issues. And so we kind of finally nailed down September 16th with him. So we're going to be talking some running backs. And it'll be interesting, too, because we'll have that added effect of kind of saying, okay, this is how we thought the running backs were going to shake out. Mm-hmm. And now we're also reacting to their week 1 usage. So that'll be interesting as well. So do you want to talk about JT a little bit since we're talking about fallers, or just?
I think we should at least briefly touch on it. I don't have too much to say. It's very hard to predict what's going to happen, but at the same time, I can't help but buy the dip, especially in Dynasty. Like redraft, I'm not touching him. Maybe 7th, 8th round, but Who knows if it's, especially with that organization, if it's going to be 4 weeks, the whole season, but he's still young enough. And if he misses a season, he's still going to have plenty of juice in him. So I say buy the dip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a pretty good thread by Seth Keller from Fantasy Face-Off Network. Using the cognitive biases like safety bias and things like that go into like why we're scared to draft JT. And he makes a good case, and to an extent, I see what he's talking about. The problem for me though is because Jim Irsay is Jim Irsay, and this whole thing is just so weird. I think waiting till he falls until in redraft or whatever till like the 6th, 7th, 8th round is not a bad thing, right? Because it's completely plausible that he plays like barely at all this season. So if you're saying to yourself like, oh well, all these people are scared, I'll take them. You may light that pick on fire, and I understand like that fantasy football is partly, especially as sort of the industry evolves, really leaning into ceiling outcomes and not playing scared. But there's always exceptions, and there's always like nuance and context to this. What happened with JT was the worst case scenario. We guaranteed to have 4 games without him scoring fantasy points, right? We don't have him on like the Dolphins offense, which probably would have been pretty cool, right? Now, with missing 4 games, teams are probably less likely to trade for him and probably likely to offer less for him when Irsay's demands were pretty through the roof. So are they all of a sudden going to turn around and take less? Fast forward all that to, speaking of Jacob Sanderson, our guest on the 16th, he was kind of laying out the scenario in one of his articles where you could see him showcased for 2 weeks, like week 6, 7 for like the trade deadline. If he doesn't get traded, then getting shut down and then getting opened up again, like maybe, I don't know, week 13 or something like that. Cause there's part of the rules about like the timing of all this anyway. And then like playing a couple games so that the contract, accrues and then he's a free agent. So you get 5 games of JT. I'm not burning a 2nd or 3rd round pick on that. Cause that's a real possibility. You know what I mean? It's not like some, you're playing scared. It's like, that's probably a safe bet with the way this situation is, because the relationship is so bad. This thing could drag out like forever, so I don't know. I'm pretty off him in redraft, buy the dip in Dynasty, considering depending on the cost, there's probably a contending team, that wants to offload him, for one of your running backs that might be a better replacement. Like, I wonder what you could put on top of, like, if you're holding on to like a Kamara or something, you know what I mean? Like, what would you have to put on top of that to get JT? Because that's going to be an attractive piece for them, because they're figuring he's an expensive Kamara, But then again, he's missing 3 games too. So I don't know. What do you think?
I'm trying to look it up now. I think off the top of my head, it was Jeff Bell. Was Football Guys posted a trade he made to get Jonathan Taylor, and he basically, at least in my opinion, gave up nothing. So some people are really like dumping on him. So I mean, I don't think it would take much on top of Kamara, especially if you wait a little bit in the season as he comes back and is about to start playing. I think you can get him pretty cheap. I'm trying to look for the trade now, but
would you say, players aside, would you give 2 seconds for JT?
Oh yeah, I would.
I think you can do that in some places.
I'd give a 26 first. I would do something like that, because that value is depreciated a little, and you got plenty of time to get that back. So I would even flirt that, just because best case scenario, he does get traded after week 6 or 7 before the deadline and goes to a team who needs a running back and is going to feed him. But even if he plays with the Colts, I mean, it'll still be fine. I think this is a bigger hit on, at least in my opinion, to Pittman and Richardson without not having JT there, which I'll talk about later.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
They're not doing Richardson favors, I'll say. And I saw one of the GM or something, not Irsay, I can't remember his name, but he said, well, Andrew Luck was fine without a good running back, not realizing that's the main reason he retired, was not getting help around him. So that's a horribly run organization. I feel comfortable saying that from the couch.
I'm looking at some recent trades, and it really is all over the place.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
just
like,
depends on who has him.
yeah, I'm seeing him going straight up for Rashad White, who I'm about to
Yeah,
dump on tonight.
no, I would do that in a
But then I
heartbeat.
also see him going for Kamara, Higbee, a first and a third.
Yeah,
You know, like you know, Joe Mixon in a first, Jahmyr Gibbs in a first for him and Najee. Like, you know, it's all over the place.
no, it really is.
Yeah, should be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Okay, so speaking of fallers, how are you sort of defining fallers for the purpose of this exercise that we're about to do?
At this point in the season, a few of mine are either being dropped very far on the depth chart or not even being on the team when we thought they would have a role. That's a lot of it. Just training camp not looking good and looking better for other people. Pittman, like someone I'm going to talk about, I'm higher than consensus on him, but he's still dropped in my rankings for reasons I'll talk about. So it really varies. Most of it is not having the role I expected them to have or that they were projected to have, and someone else coming out in camp and just being better than them. So that's a lot of what mine are for this.
Yeah, I pick guys where the stock is falling for me, and then if it just so happens to be falling for the market too,
Yep.
you know, I'll add that in. And the reason why they're falling for me could really vary widely. You know, for example, Debo is somewhat linked to the fact that I really think it's going to be Ayuk this year. So at some point, someone's going to have to, you know, fall if he's rising, right?
Yeah.
Others, it's talent and situation and all that jazz. So, all right. But before we get started, let's pay some bills. This episode, as are all episodes, is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is an industry leader with best ball tournaments, and now, as draft season is over and the regular season is starting, pick'ems and other things you can do on the site. You know, where they have the higher lower for, like, you know, seasonal yardage and weekly stats and all that jazz too. So, you know, hop in there. You can get $100 deposit match if you are a new Underdog user and use the code GF2. You can do that by scanning that little QR code here on the video or going to underdog.com or use the Underdog app. Sign up as a new user. They will match your deposit up to $100 if you use the promo code GF2. I was telling Josh before the show started, I was like, you know what? I got some money left in that Underdog account, and like a good addict, you know, I'm just gonna instead of withdrawing it, I'm gonna burn it down, and I'll spend it more on some last minute drafts. And I did a fast draft, a weekly winners fast draft, you know, just for the heck of it, because I don't do fast drafts. You know, I am really bad at fast drafting, so I need to kind of like go in with a little bit more of like a strategy and preparation for those fast drafts. You know, because it's not just like the fact that, okay, you only have 30 seconds to make the pick. It's like, because everybody has 30 seconds to make the pick, your next pick is coming soon. And the time you have to process of how you're building this roster is, you know, so it was rough for me. So I definitely need to up my fast draft game. Yeah.
No, I think once you gain a set process and you get used to slow drafts, those drafts definitely cater to people who are a little more chaotic and just kind of pick on the realm of it, which a lot of home leagues do, because people don't sit there and look at numbers like we do and obsess over it and have a set process where each round we want this. They just go with it. And you don't have much time to process it and change your team build. So yeah,
It was a Frankenstein team. Like, it was just, I mean, there was a few things I leaned into because I've watched some videos on weekly winner strategy and how, like, you know, unlike Best Ball Mania, like, don't really lean into the elite quarterbacks and tight ends. And, you know, since it's kind of a DFS thing, you're going to have running backs in your flex more often than wide receivers might be in best ball, et cetera, like that kind of stuff. But, you know, very little sort of thought process on stacking and you know, what division is playing which and like, you know, so yeah, it was kind of rough. It's a lesson learned, right? That's how you learn, you know.
Maybe this is a growing opportunity.
All right. Well, speaking of growing, the opposite of that, I guess, I don't know, segue, is that you're falling in Dynasty ranks.
Nailed it.
And Josh, why don't you kick us off? Who's your first faller?
All right, my first is probably the most obvious, and not only I agree, but a bunch of other like industry data tools do too. It's Trey Lance. So I have him ranked at 29. I had him ranked at 17 to 19. I was still kind of holding out that, you know, the rumors that he would be third string wouldn't be there, but now it is. Now he's traded. So I definitely had to drop him down a little because his future is a little less certain. Going for 2 has him at 29 as well. And keep trade cut. This is what kind of surprised me a little. They have him down at QB 33. Mm-hmm. And I thought my moving to 29 was an overreaction. So he's getting dropped by a lot of people. His stock's crashing. His data points are at 1,876, and that's down 2,832 over 6 months. So that's a massive drop off for him. Fantasy Calc also says the same, down 576 over 30 days. I don't know how often Bulletproof updates, but he's still going, according to them, at the 710. So at the end of the 7th round, at QB 23, which is
it depends on what settings you put in for how long the calendar of like what the ADP is showing.
Gotcha. Mine's probably pretty broad then.
Yeah, if you click on the player though, the rolling average, I think those are 48-hour averages, so you can see like the trend line.
Gotcha.
The little number in the box, is like the last 48 hours, I think. Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. Yep. This is the most simple case for me. You know, he went from being a potential starter in one of the most quarterback-friendly offenses to being a backup to someone who, without injury, probably isn't going to lose their job. His future is just really uncertain for me, and I'm not willing to buy in unless I can get him, near QB 30, which at that point, he's your probably third or fourth string, hopefully your fourth string quarterback at that point.
Yeah. So the settings that I had, I guess I chose like from June onward, and it has him at the 808. The rolling averages, the trend line is gross. He's at the 12-12, right?
That makes more sense. And I don't even think I would take him there. I would take Hendon Hooker over him at this point.
What? Oh, buddy.
That's where I'm at. I think he has a lot clearer path to playing, and I think he's better. He's a better NFL suited quarterback.
Okay, so
that's where I'm at.
All right, here
I going at 1306. So
this is my time to do my Lance spiel. I guess I don't know, right? I was gonna make a video about it actually, but I just didn't have the time and the patience for that. I dropped him too, but I dropped him from 18 to 20, but importantly, I dropped him from a tier that has like Russ and Dimes and Bryson Stroud into the tier with Goff, Mac, Pickett, etc. Right? So sort of a bigger, more mixed bag tier. The reason that I'm still holding there is that there's context and nuance to this situation with Lance, right? Like it's not just that number 3 overall pick, overdrafted, he's a bust. Like that's an easy narrative. Mm-hmm. That's not what's going on, right? What's going on is that he was a bad pick for a win now team, and he was a bad pick for that coach and that coach's ego, right? That coach refuses to move the system to the talent that he has, the player that he has, and he just wants to plug in, robot quarterbacks into his genius system. So it was a bad marriage from the start, right? And Kyle Shanahan did him zero favors. And it's a behavior pattern that goes back to Mike Shanahan's behavior patterns with RG3 and Jake Plummer. There, the apple does not fall far from the tree, right? And people will say he couldn't beat out Sam Darnold. Well, okay, he couldn't beat out Sam Darnold because Sam Darnold is another Brock Purdy. It's a joystick robot West Coast offense quarterback for Kyle Shanahan's offense. Kyle Shanahan wanted Sam Darnold badly. When he was on the trade market, he was trying to get the team to throw a first-round pick out to get Sam Darnold, right? So if you're saying he couldn't beat out Sam Darnold, well, are we questioning Kyle Shanahan for loving and wanting and desiring Sam Darnold, right? In other words, it was a bad fit, right?
Yeah.
And then it started getting into his head. Listen, was he developmental? Yeah, he's always been a little developmental, right? Look at the career that he's had, though. Like, look at this, like outlier experiences that have happened in his career. They made him QB2 when they shouldn't have. They should have named Jimmy QB2 to begin with and just let him sit and develop, right? Yeah. He then gets to start, right? And and has a monsoon game and a game where he destroys his ankle, and then Jimmy steps in for an offense that was built for Jimmy Garoppolo anyway, right? So, and then he gets another outlier experience of Mr. Irrelevant hitting, right? Which, credit to the 49ers organization for seeing in Brock Purdy a smart, experienced 40 plus starts. That's important, and coachable quarterback that they could plug into the Kyle Shanahan genius system, right? And I think, listen, if you see some good stuff on this, I have a mini thread on my Twitter of 2 videos from Matt Waldman's podcast where he talks about this with 2 really sharp people, Brandon, I think Brandon's the first name, Brandon Angelo of Angelo Fantasy, and and Adam Harstead, who's smarter than all of us combined. So, and they pretty much agree with me. Here's where the problem is, right? Now it's in his head, right? And can he now have the maturity and the fortitude, right, after this like traumatic experience to turn around and develop into the quarterback that he possibly could be? And don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying Lance is great. I'm not saying Lance will be great. I'm saying Lance is a rushing quarterback, right? In our dynasty, space, right? Whose trajectory is completely, atypical and outlier from the beginning, right? And who was dealt a raw deal at his time in San Francisco. All I've ever wanted for Trey Lance was to get traded away from Kyle Shanahan, and he finally has. Now the clock begins to see what Trey Lance is. I'm almost ignoring everything else that has happened because he was in an abusive relationship.
No, I don't disagree with any of that. But it is not. I would have liked a better landing spot, though.
Okay, so but
and that's
really,
a lot of why. Yeah,
I mean, so you're probably holding on to him. So they're probably not getting out of Dak's contract for 2024. So you're probably looking at 2025 now with Lance, and that kind of explains why he's going at 12-12. That's a bet I'll make at 12-12 any day. I will drive Hendon Hooker to your house in Virginia. I would have driven him to your house in Georgia to get Trey Lance.
You make a good point, but at the same time, I'm very high on Hendon Hooker. So as my QB4, I'd rather have him because he could, once he starts, easily vault up into QB2 status. So, which Trey Lance could too. I'm not saying he couldn't either, but I think at this point, Hendon Hooker has an easier path.
Well, it's possible. I mean, really, when we look at Hendon Hooker, Jared Goff might get a contract there.
He might,
because like he works well within the system, and he's played well enough to probably earn a contract, right? And I think Hooker, where he was taken in the draft wasn't just the injury. It was like he also is developmental himself. He really only had to read half the field in the Josh Heupel offense. Like, he's a good quarterback, and he can be a capable quarterback and maybe have a Geno arc or something like that. But it's entirely possible he's stuck behind Goff for another 3 or 4 years, right? So, like, I don't know that path is really all that more laid out.
It could, but I also think he has more natural tools than Trey Lance does outside of running, because Hendon can run enough just to get first downs, kind of like Daniel Jones does. Doesn't have a ton of design runs, but I think he's more suited, more accurate, just a much better passer, and can fit in more systems.
Okay. So someone asked me, Steve checking in on Twitter, what's a fantasy take you put your life on? And I said Sam Laporta will be a top 5 tight end. I mean, Will you be dead? I don't know. Would I bet my life on that? Hell no. And I love Sam Laporta. So I don't know. Josh, what do you think?
No, I wouldn't make a bet like that. I mean, I'll just say I'll be surprised this year. Next year is a different story. 2025 or 2024 is a different story, but I don't think this year. Yeah, I think he'll be really good where he's going. I think he's a good for his ADP, but not top 5.
So speaking of the 49ers, and do you want me to go to Debo or Kittle first?
Let's do Debo, because then I'll jump into a receiver after that.
Yeah. So Debo is a faller for me. He's fallen to 28. And he's in my tier of 19 to 32. I had him around 20-ish at the end of the season, maybe 25 in May, and he's now down at 28. I actually had him at 31 for a couple weeks before I moved him back up to 28. And for going for 2, people are much higher on the consensus rankings at 18. I'm in line with Keep Trade Cut at 28, although it's interesting that he's actually gained some points there in the last month and last 3 months. I think people might have said, oh, well, maybe we bottomed out and cratered a little too much on Debo, and he is Debo, so or it's, oh, Lance is finally gone, so it's going to be the Purdy and Darnold show, and they can't run, so they're going to throw to Debo. Either way, he's inched up a little bit, but I am pretty even with KTC. Fantasy Calc has him at 26. Again, a gain over the last 30 days, a pretty substantial gain given the total of how they do their points, but down big since May and down huge since February. His ADP is 605 at wide receiver 25, and it's been roughly flat since June. His rolling average is 606. Excuse me. So why is Debo a faller for me? This is partly linked to the idea that Ayuk is a flag plant for me, right? So I see the offense working out this year where Ayuk and CMC could be 1 and 2 as far as target share goes, and that's going to hurt Debo and Kittle. Kittle's a spike week guy anyway. I'll talk about that a little later. And when all 4 of these guys were on the field, Debo kind of suffered. Once CMC came on board, his target share, I believe, stayed roughly above Ayuk most of the time, but Ayuk, broke out well last year. I believe he was like wide receiver 18 or 19, either overall on a points per game basis, right? So he's already good, and Debo loses the rushing edge to CMC. I also think there's going to be probably some regression on the efficiency with Purdy because there's tape on him now. You know what I mean? Like his touchdown efficiency was insane. If you look at what Nick Mullins did in that offense in 2018, in his 8-game stretch, it's very similar to the numbers and even the efficiency numbers that Brock Purdy did in his 6-game sample in the regular season last year. And what happened to Nick Mullins, right? So again, Purdy moves around a little bit better than Nick Mullins. I'm not saying he's as bad as Nick Mullins, but he's a limited quarterback, and the offense likes to run, right? And the offense runs with the running backs, and especially when you have CMC, which cuts off Debo's rushing. I think he's very athletic. I think he's great with breaking tackles and and you'll throw him some wide receiver screens and all that. But I really think this is going to be a CMC and Ayuk year for that 49ers offense. And so he's kind of going to be losing out on this, right? So this is kind of also related to my Ayuk flag plant from our last episode.
Yeah, so I have been higher than most on Debo, and I still am. And a lot of reason I'm still confirming that is some reports coming out of camp are that they don't want to run CMC so much. And I think I saw a few reports of that on Twitter from some beat writers. I think if they do that, they do still have Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason who are fine, but I think not getting the ball in Debo's hands in a different way will be not the smartest thing. Kyle Shanahan, while he's egotistical and kind of a douche, he does know more than me. But I mean, the numbers speak for himself when he rushes, and he still last year was very good with the ball in his hands after the catch. He still led the league and missed tackles and stuff like that. And I think, a lot of last year's struggles were due to contract, other things going on, not being fully healthy and not really maybe having his heart in it, which, that could also be that could be a knock on him. But I think he's going to be a lot better this year. I'm still high on Ayuk. I moved him up, but they're very close. I think I have Debo 2 spots ahead. I think it's going to be more spread out, and Kittle, if anything, is going to be the biggest faller in this offense, I think.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit
Yep.
about that later. So Jamie, I was on Kyle from Going for Two, Kyle Sandner. I was on his press coverage show, the last episode of the
Mhm.
summer. You know, he was doing teachers this year, and he closed it out with me. And Jamie was on fire in the chat, and he was doing fun facts really related to the stuff we were talking about. Are you old enough to remember or have heard of pop-up video on VH1?
I think so.
When VH1 would, in the days when those channels played music videos, they had this show called Pop-Up Video, and during the music video, these fun facts would pop up
Oh,
in
yeah,
these
yeah,
in
yeah.
these bubbles about, like, the singer was drunk when they were in this video, or did you know that this person's middle name comes right? And so here is Jamie, our fun fact pop-up video maven here, with Debo's dad nicknamed him Debo after the bully in the Friday movie, and his real name is Tyshun Samuel. LOL. Now, I don't know if that's true, but hey,
I
why
can
not,
understand.
right? Thanks, Jamie, for the fun fact on Debo. Yeah, so I wanted to pull up the dynasty rankings on Going for Two, and look at the wide receivers here. And let's see, Josh, you have Debo at 18, right? And then Ayuk at 24,
No, because
right?
bigger gap.
Yeah,
No, oh, but yeah.
yeah. And I'm all in on Ayuk. I've got him at 16, and I got Debo down at 28. So it's pretty flipped. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see.
No,
What's
I
your
fact
next?
checked that real quick. Friday came out in 1995. Debo Samuel's born in 96.
It's quite possible.
Yeah, it very much is. My
So
next one. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna ask you what your next follower is while I Google more on Debo's name.
This next one's a pretty obvious one. Also, Malik Davis. I have him ranked 74th. I had him in like 57 to 59 range, thinking he was going to be the backup to Pollard and get plenty of touches. KTC has him even down further. Keep Trade Cut has him at RB 94. He's down almost 100% over 6 months of his data points. Fantasy Calc has him down 240, which is also right at 100%. And Bulletproof has him going around 22 at RB 78. And that it might be worse than that since he got cut. He's probably not even being drafted. So yeah, he's on the practice squad. He's going to have a lot of stuff happen for him to get substantial playing time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they have Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn, who I was not very high on, beat him out. It's just not, it's you can draft him as your last pick if you want to, but I say just keep an eye on him on the waivers in case some injuries happen. But yeah, he took a huge fall for me. Yeah, I probably don't even have him low enough.
Same. My rankings below a certain number are still a little bit in flux because what I did to organize it for me was I was having these huge tiers of like guys who made the 53 and then guys who got waived and then the guys who got re-signed. I put them back up. So I kind of haven't like finalized it, but I think I have Malik Davis in the hundreds. You
do.
So,
it was like 103. I was looking
110. I guess
that's why I didn't even do the Going for Two consensus because only me, you, and Kyle have him ranked at this point.
Yeah, so. And it's a story that's interesting because he had some steam early in the offseason as like, oh, he's going to be behind Pollard if anything happens to Pollard. Zeke is gone. They haven't brought anybody in, and then here we are. What does this? Let me ask you a question. What does this do to your thoughts on Tony Pollard for 2023? Looking at what's there in the backfield behind him.
I think they're going to give him a shot to be the bell cow. I don't think he'll run 20 times a game, but 13 to 15 carries with 3 to 4 catches, I think, given his efficiency, will be really good. I think either they really like Dowdle, and I don't know if Deuce Vaughn enough to where Deuce Vaughn might come in on third downs, but even then, Pollard is still going to get some catches on first, second down on some screens. He's too good in space.
Yeah, I think Deuce Vaughn will have a couple fun plays, but I don't think he's going to get any sort of like regular third down role. And Dowdle isn't exactly a pass catcher from what I remember. So yeah, and due to Eckler and JT falling in my rankings and all this, I have $20 as my RB5 now in Dynasty, and I'm like, how did that happen? Right? Which is really interesting because for me, like, I look at my rankings and I don't know that I want to click on anybody that I have between Bijan at 1 and like I don't know.
Who's ahead
Like
of him? CMC and Saquon and Brees?
Brees, CMC, Saquon,
Okay.
and then Pollard. So anybody between
That's pretty good.
Bijan and like maybe Dobbins at 12, and then again, like then it's just guys that I want to do as like 0 RB builds, like Tank and Charb and Spears and
Brian Robinson, guys like that.
or Khalil Herbert, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robb, right? Like, so there's this swath of RBs that like I have ranked a certain way because like that's just where I should rank them, and not because like, oh, I'm a slave to consensus. I mean, like I literally rank them there because of all factors considered, but I don't know how comfortable I am clicking on them in a startup when I would rather build my team differently. Like even Ramondre, who I love, who I think is going to have a huge 2023, there's things to be concerned about there. I don't think Zeke is going to be a big dent in his workload at the goal line or anywhere else, but he's there, and Ty Montgomery can catch passes, and they've said they want to use Ramondre less. And, the offense, has slightly better pass catchers this year, et cetera, et cetera. So like I could tell myself that about a lot of the backs there. So I think it's really, hitting home how can I put it? Like how few guarantees there are at running back now in fantasy football, Yeah.
Yep.
So my next folder, speaking of running backs with no guarantee, let's do Rachaad White. So at the beginning of the as soon as Fournette got cut, I was like, sell Rachaad White. People are going to go over the moon about Rachaad White. They're going to assume that he's like RB1. Sell him now. And there were people who were calling him a huge buy and, all offseason saying he's the screaming buy. And it never made sense to me. I was intrigued by Rachaad White coming out of college and had him, in my top 8 or 10 running backs in that class. Did put up competent rushing numbers in college, but it was in the Pac-12, which you kind of take with a grain of salt. But really where he stood out was his pass catching, his receiving chops, right? But I never really thought of him as a full workload 3 down sort of guy, and now we have a situation where you're really just leaning into projectable volume, which I want to do as little as possible. In as much as volume is king, I don't want like my excuse, my reason for drafting somebody is like, well, you think he's going to get volume. There's nobody else there. Like I'd rather bet on somebody who's talented around the same area of the draft. So, I have him down at running back 36, but importantly in the new tier where he's in running back 36 to 41, I had him floating around 29 to 31 all off season, going for 2 likes and better at 23. KTC also likes him better at 23. Up a smidge over a month in KTC, but down over the last 3 months. And then the opposite story on Fantasy Calc, where he's still RB21. ADP of 806 at RB23, roughly flat since around June, with a rolling average of the mid 8th. I'm not spending the mid 8th on Rachaad White. If you add on to everything that I was saying, we now look at a terrible offense, a quarterback who doesn't check down nearly as much as Tom Brady does, a guy who probably is not good for sizable rushing workload. And I just don't. I mean, he wasn't even as efficient as Leonard Fournette was in a lot of the metrics in 2022. And I don't foresee that. I just don't think the talent is there. You know what I mean? And when I'm looking at the ADP, and he's going at 806 in line with I'd rather bet on Cam Akers in the mid 8th. I'd rather bet on Christian Kirk. I'd rather bet on Deontay F. Johnson. I'd rather bet on Charb, right? And then, it's just where he's going and the cost that he is in the streets. I'm just not doing it for Rachaad White. Recently, I traded, you'll love this. I traded Rachaad White and a 4th for Trey Lance and a 3rd, right? This is before the trade to Dallas,
Yeah.
And that just kind of speaks to how I view both players and how far Trey Lance has fallen in that you're paying up for Rachaad White now. But Rachaad White straight up for Hollywood is a recent trade, and Rachaad White straight up for Miles Sanders. I'm smashing both of those.
Yeah.
I'm fairly low on Rachaad White. I just don't see it. And now last couple weeks, we're hearing a lot of good stuff about Sean Tucker, who, absent the heart thing, was going to be in my top 5, RBs really in the 2023 class for the most part. I think the lowest I ever had him was 6. So altogether, not feeling Rachaad White. He's a big faller for me.
No, that's fair. And I think, even if Sean Tucker does kind of eat into his workload, Baker Mayfield's not Tom Brady when it comes to dumping off and taking what you can get, but he still does target his running backs a little bit. It's not the worst case, but even if Sean Tucker does come in on earlier downs, I think Rachaad White's receiving profile is good enough to, at least in full PPR leagues, keep him at least relevant. But yeah, 8th round, there's other guys I'd rather take. Mm-hmm. And I need to move down my rankings a little. I'd probably move them down to like 27, 28.
Jamie in the chat, just back to Pollard about that looks like he's working out to prepare for a full workload. Let's remember too that Pollard was the RB. Wasn't he like a top 12 RB last year?
No, top 10. I think he was like 7 or 8 off the top of my head.
And there were still 250 plus touches that didn't involve Tony Pollard. So he doesn't need that many more than he had last year to really hit home. So he doesn't even really need to be the beast, right? I don't know. There's just so many reasons to be in on Tony Pollard, and I'm loving it this year.
That's what I was saying. Even 13 or 14 carries, that's a so bigger workload than he got. I don't want him to carry 20 times a game. That's not going to be good long term. But 13 carries and then a couple of catches, he's going to be really good. Yeah. All right, I'll move to my next one. I'm going to hit on a receiver here. It's Jameson Williams. I honestly have always been.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. I'll save it for when you're finished.
I've always been a little bit lower on Jameson Williams than consensus. A lot of it because I felt like he didn't have a full route tree and he was kind of limited to big plays. But he is electric with the ball. He's got lightning speed. I have him ranked at 42, down from 33 to 35. Going for 2 has him at 35. So I'm not too far below market on that. KTC has him at 36. He's down 1,000 data points over 6 months. So he does have a pretty decent drop-off there. Fantasy calc still down 451 over 30 days from down to 2,168. And most of this isn't due to the suspension. That doesn't help because you're missing, 6 games this year. Then he's still got to come in and integrate himself into the system. But it's also, when he was showing up in practice, the reports weren't great on him. They said he didn't look that good, wasn't running good routes, had some drops. So it's not a massive drop, but I'm really drafting hardly any Jameson Williams. And the teams I've had him, I've been able to trade him for some good picks. And, I think I traded him straight up for Dotson last year. So I'm definitely trying to flip him for people who are still high on him. The upside's definitely there, but it's also a lot lower floor than I expected. And I'm just like George Pickens, Gabe Davis. I'm not always in on guys like that.
Yeah, I still have him ranked at 30. He was probably as high as 22 not too long ago. I love the talent coming out of the draft, really going into and coming out of the draft. There was this huge tier of four guys, Wilson, Olave, JMO, and London. And, JMO was in there. I said, listen, any of these guys could end up being the best wide receiver in this class. I think he's a little bit more than a deep threat and doesn't get as much credit for that. And so for me, with the first round draft capital and the huge talent, I'm a little slower to keep dropping him, as you saw with my stubbornness on Lance. I acknowledge that what we've seen happen isn't great, right? But the team was willing to spend a first round pick on him, knowing that they wouldn't get much out of him, the first year. They basically redshirted him, and he got 1 catch for 40 yards. Well, I mean, come on, let's be real, right? It wasn't a normal year, right?
He didn't play a lot of snaps.
Yeah. So, and yes, the 6-game suspension isn't great, right? And so, and there's a lot of data that says, a wide receiver who even, who misses that much time in their first year, and I get that. right? I understand that. Part of what's happening for me with fantasy football is saying, on the one hand, there's these rules of thumb to have, like the data shows a wide receiver who misses that much time in their first year, et cetera, doesn't turn out well, right? And so now that everybody has access to that data, right, and everybody's more informed, I think for me it becomes more important then to figure out who within that group is worth saying or worth trying to say or worth betting on they're an exception. For me, it's Jamison Williams, right? Because I just love the talent so much. He could be just an absolute game changer. There are concerns as long as Jared Goff is the quarterback and as long as he's primarily a deep threat. It's not a good match, right? Goff is a low ADOT, quarterback. So I get that, right? Now, just because I have him ranked 30th, though, around guys like Bateman and Kirk and Judy, and Debo, I know that out in the streets, he's not valued at that, right? So, I'm not paying what I would pay for a Debo or a Bateman or a Kirk if I'm attempting to get JMO. You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm probably maybe a little high on him considering everything that's happened. And I do have him in that huge tier of like 19 to 32. So, I am saying that he's essentially similar to guys, that people love, like, Jordan Addison and Christian Watson. And I get how that can sound, right, because of all the bad news. But for me, it's more about like buy the dip on a super talented first rounder and see what happens, so.
No, I get it. Just looking at the guys I have ahead of him, I have Elijah Moore, Bateman, Kirk, Quentin Johnson, Marvin Mims. I just can't, especially with a suspension. I think the suspension would move him up into that massive tier of receivers down at the bottom end. But knowing he's going to miss 6 games and going to have to get acclimated, there's better floor plays there. Even DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen are close. If I'm trying to win now, I'd much rather have them.
Well, yeah, for sure. I think if you're looking for points early in 2023, that's a different story. Yeah, let me ask you this. Terry McLaurin is going 2 picks before him in ADP, has a turf toe thing. So also will, maybe be shaky early and turf toe can linger, right? Would you rather have Terry McLaurin or Jamison Williams in a vacuum?
Yeah, I'd still rather have Terry McLaurin. And because this point in the draft, I'm looking for floor plays. I don't want to take a guy at this point that could just completely bottom out. Like Jamison Williams he could come off, not be good until week 12 or something. By that point, I feel like it's a wasted pick. So I'd rather have higher floor at that point. And that's just my draft strategy for those rounds.
And I guess recently I'm kind of shying away from floor being a tiebreaker in a decision. Right.
Yeah. Earlier rounds, I don't think about that. I shoot for upside. But as we go on, especially middle rounds, I feel like middle rounds are very vital to, if you're trying to win now, those are picks you got to hit on.
So, my feelings on capitalism. But when we look at the Dynasty universe, right, a lot of the principles of investment and, for that matter, behavioral economics, psychology, game theory, all that plays into what we do. Right. And I was listening to something today about something that we're going to get into with Jacob later about anti-fragility and all that. But anyway, so the person was talking about like biotech startups, right? If you say to yourself, 85% of biotech startups don't make it out of the first year, and another 10% or whatever don't make it out of the first 5 years, that means 5% is left that actually make it past 5 years. So they are inherently a risky investment, but the returns on the ones that make it are huge. So you're actually okay making some bets on those biotech startups, right? Especially if you're making other, 55, 45, 60, 40 bets in other places. And, if you just lean into a little bit more risk and ceiling, because the returns are going to be great. And in Dynasty, if the returns are awful, okay, well, I got the 102. You know, like, and so I'm starting to try to embrace that a little bit more. You know, because I don't know, I've been risk averse in the past, and being risk averse just leads to a lot of mediocrity, I think. And I'm just, you know, I'm not trying for fourth place. Yeah.
No, that's fair. Maybe, tying into this metaphor or whatever, I think my brief exposure to options trading has made me a little less risk adverse because I've seen how quickly it can swing. And, I very rarely go into dynasty drafts, maybe in like $10-$20 leagues looking to rebuild. So I'm usually, and in just my opinion, I'd rather have guys who are just above average at that point that are hitting every single week than, striking out. And then next thing you know, I'm having to completely swap my strategy. And
so. Okay, I got you. My next faller is, should I keep going with the 49ers and do Kittle?
Might as well just go ahead and knock them out.
Yeah, all right. So, let's alternate 49ers and Buccaneers. So, my next caller is Kittle. I think this is pretty in line with the market. It wasn't a big fall for me, but what's important here that I wanted to point out is the tiering. So he fell to tight end 7 for me, and he was essentially tight end 5-6 for most of the offseason. But what I now have is a big tier of tight ends 4 to 9. Right. And instead of like a 4-5-6 and a 7-8-9 that I had for a while. So for a while there, it was, Hop, Goddard, Kittle in some order, 4-5-6, tier break. And then the guys I had below them, like Kincaid, Freiermuth, and Waller. Now I've got everybody in all one tier. And I've got Freiermuth ahead of Kittle. I think Freiermuth is going to explode this year. I think Kittle is a spike week, unreliable, aging guy. It's great for best ball, spike weeks, not great for managed league week to week. Going for 2 has him at 6. KTC has him at 6. Fantasy Calc has him at 6. Declines, though, across the board on KTC and Fantasy Calc by all measures, 3 months, 1 month. He's down, in Fantasy Calc, for example, like he's 2494 is his total, right? And he's lost 1,500 points since early January, right? So that's huge, right? When you look at the percentage, right, of what the whole is, right? So, and he's had a pretty flat ADP for most of the offseason at 602 and tight end 5, but the rolling average is 609 from a 603 high in mid-July. So there is some dip going on with Kittle, and I think people are saying like, leaning into ceiling is one thing, but at the position of tight end, it's unpredictable and spike weeky, and he's 30. There's maybe some caution to have. And so this is linked to my Ayuk flag plant, my sort of semi-flag plant on Freiermuth, and so therefore Kittle's now mixed in this big tier and below Freiermuth for the first time all offseason. 2 trades that I saw recently for him. Kittle for Derrick Henry, which I think is interesting because they're similar in the sense that they're aging superstars, so to speak, right? And then Kittle for a 24 third and a 25 first, right? I'm smashing the picks on that particular one, even in a premium. And then the Henry thing is just, it's very dependent on roster construction, but I'd probably rather have Henry in like a YOLO last ride year with Tennessee, then Kittle's unpredictability. But at the same time, I can probably catch points somewhere else at running back that I might not be able to get at tight end. So that's kind of close for me.
Yeah, I assume those teams making those trades are both trying to win now and just need different pieces. So I'm going to smash both of those, honestly, because Henry, as long as he's healthy, he's going to have a really good workload. Kittle, you don't know that because, looking at it, we have the same top 10 tight ends. They're just, same top 7 are all the same. I've just moved Freiermuth above Kittle too, and I got her ahead. So I'm with you 100%. And that's more me being both high on Debo and Ayuk. You're down on Debo, but I'm high on both of them, and I'm high on CMC. So that leaves somebody out to dry, and I think it's going to be Kittle.
Yeah.
Touchdown dependent. That's what he'll be.
Yeah.
And at the point he's going, I'm not trying to get I'll draft Tyler Higbee later.
Who's gonna probably eat, especially early with Cup out. So let's look at that ADP of like around 602-ish. He's going in the same area, as Derrick Henry, Javonte Williams, Calvin Ridley, Michael Pittman, Jared Goff, Dameon Pierce.
I'll take all of those over him.
Yeah, I don't
pretty easily, honestly. Especially Dameon Pierce.
I think if I'm not getting one of the top three, right, and I'm not getting Freiermuth at what I think is a value, because I don't have to draft him as high as I have him ranked, then I'm probably waiting, unless somebody falls to a point where I think it's a good value. But
almost all my startups this year, I've been, if I don't get Andrews or Hawkinson, I'm getting Njoku in the 8th, 9th, or 10th rounds, and I'm very happy with that as opposed to getting Kittle in the 6th.
All right, who's your next fault?
My next one is, I'm going to touch on a running back, Najee Harris. I'm pretty below market on this one, at least for going for 2. I have him at 17, down from 11 to 14. Going for 2 has him at 12. Keep trade cut, RB 15. Fantasy Calc RB 12. So I'm not too far behind on them. He's not down that much over 6 months in KTC or Fantasy Calc, and he's going as RB 11 in drafts because a lot of people are still high on him. But I'm honestly, I tried not to buy into this hype of Jaylen Warren, but the more I watch them both play, I think he's clearly a more dynamic running back. Najee was faster coming out of camp, but they just don't look. He just doesn't look faster when he's running in game speed. And I just honestly think they kind of ran Najee into the ground a little his first year. And I think that kind of ate into his production because he's not been efficient. I don't think he's exceptionally good. He relied on receptions and touchdowns his first year. And I do think it's going to be more of a committee than people are expecting. I don't think he's going to get the workload that a lot of people are drafting him to get. So that worries me a little.
Yeah. I think with Najee, you can make a good argument that second half of the year, things improved all around for the team, including him, right? He got that plate out of his cleat. He performed better. The offense improved. Hey, arrow up. They've had a good preseason. They're getting some buzz, the Steelers, right?
Kenny Pickett looks good, too, I'll say, as a hater. He looks pretty good.
The thing about Najee, and honestly, even if you don't think that Jaylen Warren is the second coming of Tony Pollard, I'm down on Najee, too.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had him reluctantly and begrudgingly floating in that tier that I had with that I had Ramondre in that Ramondre Chubb area. And I put him down at 16, right? And because we know what he is now, you know what I mean? He's a volume dependent, uninteresting, not very explosive, reliant on breaking tackles and reliant on volume guy, and I can get something similar at a much cheaper cost, and his name is Brian Robinson.
Yep. Oh, exactly.
Brian Robinson is discounting Najee this year.
Yep.
Right. And I think you throw into that with the Steelers offense improving, which rising tides would lift the Najee boat, but it's also going to improve in a way that I think is going to be more beneficial to guys like Pickett, Pickens, Deontay, and Freiermuth rather than Najee. So let me read you something as a tease for the listeners and viewers for Jacob coming on in a couple weeks. This is from one of his articles. I'm only read a little bit because you got to pay for the content. I'm not going to.
It's worth it.
Yeah. So Najee Harris, depending on who you ask, Najee Harris is a crappy plotter, a misunderstood genius, a talent agnostic beneficiary of guaranteed volume, a midnight toker, or a space cowboy. A little Steve Miller reference there. But after 2 years in the NFL, we have a fairly good idea of who he is on the field. Above average breaking tackles, can sustain a workload. But the further you sort of separate any metric from him engaging with defenders, breaking tackles and things like that, the worse he becomes. Not good with decision making. is similar to Kenneth Walker in that way. We've seen this profile before, and it's a near carbon copy of David Montgomery. Listen, I like Monty. I think he's kind of been underrated, for a while. But, he's David Montgomery. Like, there's nothing exciting about him. There's upside for Najee to, maybe be, a top 12 running back this year. But, there's also, I could see him being, RB21 this year as well. So I think when you're looking at what you're asking me to pay for him in ADP and in the trade streets, I can't do it. I'd rather bet on other guys. So, I think he's mid-4th, right? Something like that still in ADP. Yep. Maybe he's in the 5th now, something like that.
It's still a lot higher than I'm willing to get for an absolute floor play because Montgomery, where he's going, like I said earlier, I like to get guys I know are safe, and Montgomery's safe where he's going, but Najee where he's going isn't worth it.
Yeah, I have him at 501 here with the rolling average of 504. Like he's in that neighborhood of Nick Chubb, Kenneth Walker, Ramondre Stevenson. I'm probably taking all three of those above him.
I'll even go Damian Pierce and J.K. Dobbins. I'll take over him. They're going around later.
Oh, agree. I have both of them. Well, I have Pierce ranked below him, but at cost, Pierce for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's going ahead of Tony Pollard essentially in ADP, right? What are we doing here, folks? So, I mean, and yeah, that stretches back since June, but like I said, the rolling average is still 504, and Pollard's rolling average is still 411, so they're still close. Like they should not be that close in ADP. If you're asking me to take a running back that early in those rounds, it's not going to be Najee Harris.
I agree.
All right. What are your thoughts on Jaylen Warren this year? Like, I think he's getting a little overhyped. I like him. Certainly like him as one of the zero RB types, or the type of guys I like to pound late in drafts, like Jaylen Warren and Tyson Chandler and Jerome Ford. Keontae Ingram. Those, I have them ranked around those guys. So I think there's value there. A slight standalone, definite contingent upside, but I think he's getting a little overhyped, and you could probably get more for him in the trade streets than you should.
No, I agree. I do like Jaylen Warren. I drafted him a lot last year, expecting this to happen. I guess I was maybe a year early, but you also got to know what you're getting. Like I don't think he's as talented as Najee in a vacuum, but he seems to bring a different element that they're lacking, like big playability on the handoff. Najee's solid, kind of like Montgomery, but like you said, he's not a home run hitter. I feel like Jaylen Warren has that ability, and he showed it in the preseason. But at the same time, you got to know what you're getting. I think if something happened to Najee, I think they'll either bring someone else in, and I don't think he's going to have, I don't know. I think he's fine.
Yeah. Let's see. So should I keep picking on the Buccaneers or go with the quarterback? What do you want me to do?
They lost Ryan Jensen. Let's go with the quarterback. We can't kick him too much.
Oh, that's another reason to hate Rachaad White, right?
I meant to bring that up. They lost their really good center. That's an important piece to the line. Yeah.
All right, so I'll do the quarterback, and I'll save the Buccaneers for last. So Dak Prescott, right? Dak Prescott's weird for me because, in a sense, I feel the vibes around him are worse than my vibes for him. What I see people saying about him, I think I'm like, I like him more than that. But in my ranks, he's fallen, right? I had him around 9 to 11, for most of the offseason, and now he's at 13. So the idea is that he's essentially slid down that entire 9 to 13 tier, and now he's at the bottom. I think I've always had him in this tier, so it's not a huge drop, but essentially, he's getting to the point where I have less faith in him than other risky plays like Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson and things like that. Excuse me. So going for 2 has him at 13, so I'm right in line there. KTC and Fantasy Calc are a little below that at 15 and 16. He's definitely down on KTC over a 3-month and 1-month period. Huge drops in Fantasy Calc considering the percentage of the total. He's at 35, 38 on Fantasy Calc, and he's dropped over 1,000 points in the last 30 days. His ADP is 301. He's down to quarterback 12. So people are taking, Richardson and Bryce above him with a rolling average of 307. So here's where it gets, I think, interesting, right? So he's a faller for me, but I still have him above Bryce and Stroud. And I'm not taking them where they're at in ADP in startups as rookies. I think people are inflating them. I have Richardson one rank above him, 12 versus 13. It's hard for me to pay what I have to pay, though, for Richardson in a startup. He's going late first, early second at quarterback like 9-10. So in a way, Dak has fallen for me, but I kind of am still okay with him where he's at ADP, Now, why has he fallen for me is, I think, the question on everybody's mind for the millions of watchers and listeners. And, it's a little bit of, I feel a little better bumping Tua up. I feel a little better, keeping Richardson at 12. I think the 80th and above percentile outcome for Deshaun Watson is could be huge. I think, people are. I don't think Caleb Williams is going to be a Cardinal. I think that contract for Kyler is unmovable.
Yeah.
But either way, as down as I am on Kyler as like a processor and a leader and in some ways a passer, he puts up elite fantasy numbers when he's on the field, right? And he did so with Cliff Dang Kingsbury. I think he can do it in different regimes, right? So it's a matter of Dak's losing out because he's older, rushes less, right? And now loses Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator, right? And Mike McCarthy takes over. Now they've said, the sort of narrative has been, oh, Kellen Moore, wanted to score too many points and pass too much. We're going to run, right? What they've done with their personnel, however, right, essentially, Pollard and pray for rain in the backfield and adding Brandon Cooks tells me, okay, maybe they still are, going to pass as much as they do. But, his weapons outside of Lamb are pretty mediocre. I probably like Gallup more than most people do, but he's Michael Gallup. Brandon Cooks, it change of scenery could make it better, but he's Brandon Cooks. And he's, 30, 31 years old, right? The tight ends, right, are, Dalton Schultz, I think, benefited from having Dak. I think he elevated Schultz above where his talent is. And so I think there's reason to like Ferguson and Schoonmaker. I don't know that there's reason to like them all that much, though. There's a lot of unknown there. And they could split duty. Like, I just think there's enough data points on Dak to say, okay, it's time to now push him further down below like younger guys like Tua who are in like dynamic offenses, even though they don't rush much. Definitely below the upside play of Anthony Richardson, who could break fantasy, and below Kyler and Watson, who, are younger than him and still have a little bit of that. Well, Kyler, a lot of that rushing that Dak doesn't. So it's like Dak's like that last of the bunch now. And I'm not putting him down there with like Daniel Jones and Russ and Bryson Stroud yet. I still value him more than them. But he certainly slid in my eyes, and I probably am going to try to move off a couple shares. Yeah. So.
No, I agree with you. We haven't ranked this. I haven't ranked one spot ahead of you in this because I have Kyler 1 or 2 spots below him. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. I moved him behind Richardson, Watson. Watson is one I kind of teetered with because looking at. Yeah. Besides last year, Dak Prescott's been a really good quarterback. 2021 he was top 10, and 2020 before he got hurt, he was first in points per game. So I do think there's still talent there, but at the same time, last year kind of opened your eyes a little. He hasn't looked great in the preseason, so I did drop him down a little. But yeah, I got him right where you have him.
So looking in the trade streets, Dak and Njoku for Burks and 2 firsts. I know that we get too, starry-eyed over first-round picks in Dynasty. Like I get that, but when I look at the liquidity there and the ceiling of Burks, I'm probably taking Burks in the 2 firsts. Obviously, if it's a team where I'm saying, okay, I really do want the points in 2023, that becomes a different story because Njoku could have a good year, and it's tight end premium. But I'm probably taking Burke in the 2 first there. What do you think?
It really depends on what I have at quarterback, because it's kind of hard for me to deal a quarterback like that I do have ranked in the top 12 without getting another one back, unless I've hit on some picks. Like you got Jalen Hurts last year in like the 4th or 5th round, because I have a few leagues where I have Lamar and Jalen Hurts as my quarterbacks. A league like that, I would do it if I still had Dak.
Rarely will do that. I rarely will move a quarterback of Dak's ilk and not get a quarterback back. So let me put it this way. Let's say you have one of the guys above him. Let's say you have one of the big
Anthony
8
Richardson or something.
No, not even that. Like one of the big 8 that we can really trust. Like say you have Trevor Lawrence, right? Or Justin Herbert, right? And you double tapped and got Dak. But like your quarterback 3 is let's see.
Goff or Geno or somebody.
Geno, Mac.
If I had that, if I had
Sam
Mac Jones,
Howell, Kenny Pickett.
I'll probably do it, but in a vacuum, I'm going to keep Dak and Njoku, I think. Yeah. And same with the other trade you have there. I'm going to take Dak in the 2 first instead of Lawrence.
Yeah, that's too much for Lawrence. I wanted to put that in there because even though I'm down on Dak, I think adding 2 firsts just to get Trevor Lawrence, as much as I love Trevor Lawrence, that's a little pricey for me. Yeah, I want something back on top of Lawrence there.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Are we on my last one?
Yeah, we're on your last one. Yeah.
All right. This one I'm still above market on, but this is just more of a temper expectations on. It's Michael Pittman. I have him at 22nd, down from 16 to 18, so it's only like a four-person place drop. Going for 2 has him at 23. KTC has him at 31, so I think more people are down on him than I am, but I've always been a little higher. I just think a lot not having Jonathan Taylor, 4 games, it's not as big of a deal. That's why I didn't move him down a ton. But if he somehow misses a whole year and then you have Anthony Richardson back there with Deion Jackson, it's just not going to be a good offense. Anthony Richardson will still get his. Pittman will still get his, but I definitely think it caps his ceiling without having a big play, because I think defenses are really going to hone in on him and just make the Colts beat him with Alec Pierce and Jelani Woods, whoever else they have. I know I'm missing somebody.
Josh Downs in the slot.
But yeah, still, it's a rookie. So you're obviously going to make them beat you with those guys. And I think defenses might really try and shut down Pittman and make, Richardson a rookie quarterback throw or run to other young players to beat him. So he's still really good. But I think if JT doesn't come back after 4 games, just temper your expectations.
I have him ranked fairly close to you. I think I have him at 19 or 20. But for me, I have him 19. For me, he's the first wide receiver in that huge tier of 19 to 32.
That's where I had him.
Let me give you why, he's let me give you the sunny picture on Pittman. So, first of all, this is his contract year, right? So he may be somewhere else next year. And a phrase that I will steal from Adam Harstead is situation changes faster than talent. Right. And so you may have to eat a somewhat, murky year, but he could be somewhere really interesting in 2024. And the market is kind of down on him because of the Richardson factor. So it might be a good buy window. Now, again, and I think that's important to say, because just because these guys are fallers doesn't mean we're not buying them. In fact, it may mean we're buying them because they're falling, right? In my situation with Godwin, who I'm about to do, or Rashad White, I'm not. But Pittman, I would be.
Yeah, I'm still above market, so yeah.
Yeah. And the idea with Pittman for me is Ben Gretsch and JJ Zacharyson have shown that offenses that use a certain percentage of their pass attempts from the RPO, which they're going to run a lot in Indianapolis, right? Hyper concentrate their targets within a couple guys. I think Pittman's going to be one of those guys, and Pittman can run a good slant, right?
Oh yeah.
And the thing about RPOs is that you have to account for a super dangerous quarterback like Anthony Richardson, and the throw comes out quickly on a read if it's a pass, right? And so I think that might mitigate some of the impact that we have of the other narratives, which are, rookie quarterback, rushing quarterback hurts Pittman, right? I think that kind of bumps him up a little bit, and kind of, whereas maybe there's downward pressure from the rookie quarterback, rushing quarterback, not JT situation. I think there's upward pressure from the way he could be used in the Shane Steichen offense. And so I think he's going to be heavily targeted this year, almost like Drake London in Atlanta, right? And I think there's reason to be a little optimistic, even for 2023. More optimistic than I think the vibes are out in the streets. Put it that way.
Yeah. No, probably. I mean, KTC has him at 31, Fantasy Calc at 35.
Yeah,
so,
that's
obviously
entirely too low.
No, I agree. Even if that happens, I think it might raise his floor, lower his ceiling, because I don't think there will be as many big play opportunities as there was when they were drop back passing, but it will give more, especially in PPR leagues. He might have more targets, more catches, less yards, and I think he'll still get his touchdowns because he's a big body. He uses his body well. Right. So it might just be a different profile, and he might not drop off at all. So,
I'm trying to remember. Matt Harmon had a really good thing about Pittman on the reception perception site, where it was like he suffered through Carson Wentz, who wanted to push the ball down the field too much, and Matt Ryan, who had an
at that point in his career,
it was like a pop gun arm, or maybe it was revert. Either way, like both of those are not good for Pittman, because as much as he's a big boundary guy, he's not like a fast deep threat. He's an intermediate guy, right?
Yeah.
So neither of those quarterbacks were good for him. I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson is a great intermediate passer. In fact, that's probably the weakest part of his passing game at the moment. But they're not running RPOs with Wentz and Matt Ryan. You don't have to worry about Wentz and Matt Ryan breaking big rushes to hurt you. So I think there's a little bit of hope. For Pittman.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, that's positive. Let's go to negative, and someone that you're going to argue with me about, and that's Chris Godwin. I have been such a huge Godwin fan for so long. Just really loved the talent, and just thought like, not that he hasn't produced, but that like he could produce better with that talent, right? And we've seen, in the years with Brady and stuff like that, the ADOT drop and things like that, right? But here's what we have now with Chris Godwin. Basically some of the same reasons I hate Rachaad White is because I hate the team and I hate the quarterback. The team passed for over 700 pass attempts last year, right? So that ain't happening with Baker Mayfield. The team ain't staying on the field that much because the offense is going to be bad. So Godwin, I don't know, like he just keeps falling and falling, partly because I'm raising other guys, but I've got him now wide receiver 40, right? Excuse me. In the tier of 33 to 46, right? I had him in like the early mid 30s for most of the offseason. Going for 2 still has him at 21. KTC is above me, but below going for 2 at 33. I forgot to update the number on Fantasy Calc where they have him. If you could tell me that while I'm still talking about Godwin.
Mm-hmm.
But as much as he's like risen in 30 days there, he's had big drops since May and February. He's now down in the 7th round in ADP, mid-7th, 706 at wide receiver 32. So so KTC in the ADP streets have him in the 30s. I'm below that, at 40. I just don't see it working out with Godwin. I just don't see so there's actually been a debate. People are saying that, there's data that shows that Evans will benefit from the way that Baker plays. And there's data that shows that Godwin will benefit from the way that Baker plays. I don't know that either of them really are going to be all that good this year. I'm just not using what I have to use to get Godwin anymore as mid-7th for ADP or in the trade streets. So if I look at the ADP, he's at 704. Who's going around him? you know, oh wait, the ADP updated. He's now down to 706, right? So, but the rolling average is 704, right? So, you know, seventh round, Jordan Love, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, Dalton Kincaid, Jamison Williams, Chris Godwin, Zay Flowers, Russ, DeAndre Swift, Miles Sanders, Amari Cooper, and Aaron Rodgers, right? So of those 11 guys, just eyeballing it, there's probably at least 6 of them that I'm taking before I want Godwin in that round. Now I'm usually grabbing receivers in that round, so it probably is another receiver. I'd probably roll the dice on the rookie Zay Flowers. I would definitely take Dotson. You know, if I think Russ is kind of a value still at 708. So if I still didn't have a quarterback by then, I would take that. If I was in the market for a running back, I'd take Sanders above him. I'd take Amari Cooper before I took him. So I'm just the only thing that's helping Godwin right now lately is Evans' injury and the contract dispute, right? So if Evans gets traded because of this contract dispute early in the year, it could be a situation where we saw, and again, I'm not comparing them as players, but just the analogy of Amon-Ra toward the end of his rookie season when like Hawk and Swift and everybody was out. He was the only guy there, and he ate, right? And so it could be that. It could be that, you know, if Evans gets traded, the offense continues to tank even worse, and it's bad for Godwin. But like that's the only hope I have now for Godwin is that Evans is getting dinged a little bit, and I have him ranked even lower. You said you're going to push back on Godwin. Tell me why I'm too low on him.
Yeah, I am just a little bit because I do see, you know, the scenario where that happens. But when it comes to the person I think that's going to benefit in that offense, I let talent play out. And I think Godwin's just a better all around receiver. You know, Evans has been really good. You know, he's got 1,000 yards every year, but he has been more boom bust. And I think when Godwin's healthy, I just think he's the better receiver. And I think he's fully healthy. I think he's going to be, you know, a better safety blanket. You know, I think he's just going to be a safer target. And in that offense, I just want volume. And with the Evans stuff going on, I think Godwin just offers that.
Okay.
So that's it. I have him at 20. I have one spot ahead of Dotson. So honestly, in a startup, I might take Dotson ahead because it's so close. But I'm still pretty high on him just because I think he's going to be the one that I think he's going to get the most targets on the team.
If I had a team of guys who I am worried I might be too low on, and or guys I hope I'm too low on, because I like Godwin would probably be on that team, right? But okay, let me read you my tier, right? 33 to 46, right? So Marvin Mims.
I have Godwin higher.
Okay. Zay Flowers.
I love Zay Flowers, but I still have Godwin higher.
QJ.
Godwin.
Wow. Amari Cooper.
Godwin by like 4 or 5 spots.
I love this one. George Pickens.
Godwin.
See, the thing with Pickens is like I'm not a big Pickens fan, just like you're not a big Pickens fan. I just think the arrow is up enough on him and the arrow's down enough on Godwin that you know.
Damien, someone in our league, I sent him a trade offer for Pickens actually, and I thought about sending one for Gabe Davis just to.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, you know, I at least want to have a share or two.
Yeah. Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, Dynasty. Yeah. Godwin.
I could see that being close, right? I only have Lockett 2 spots ahead of him.
Lockett's
31. There's a chance that he's not in that offense next year, and there's some uncertainty there. So, you know, but I do think Lockett is a safer bet. TMC, Terry McLaurin, with turf toe.
I got McLaurin at the end of that big tier.
Yeah. So, all right. So you have him.
I've Godwin over all those. I have Godwin at 20,
okay.
22.
So then you have him over Elijah Moore?
Yep. I have him over Watson, Ridley.
Christian Watson, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think he's a pretty safe maybe this is showing a lot about how I'm starting to play Dynasty, getting safer guys as opposed to like. So maybe I'll just turn into an old man now that I hit 30, and I don't want to risk it on these young bucks.
Yeah, no, I feel you. All right, so in the trade streets, Chris Godwin, straight up for Addison. I found that one surprising.
Depending, if I had a young core, I would swing Addison. But if I have an older team, I'm definitely trying to win now. I would lean Godwin, but
I'm still
mostly
smashing Addison
Addison.
on that. Like
I mean, he is sitting into a pretty good role in
Adam
Minnesota.
Thielen ran the second most routes in the NFL
Yeah.
last year. Let's say that the offense, has 10% fewer pass attempts than they did last year. And let's say the first couple weeks they're relying a little bit more on KJ Osborne than Addison. I just think Addison is just going to be, he's going to eat in that offense.
I agree.
Godwin and Zeke for Olave.
No, I'm smashing Olave.
Yeah.
That's not really even particularly close. Zeke means nothing to me in Dynasty at this point.
Yeah, it was weird, right? Like,
yeah,
I have some concerns about Olave, but I still would take Olave there. Yeah.
Honestly, better production at a much younger age. So already.
Well, we started with JT. Let me give you my honorable mention of Austin Eckler, as far as a faller goes. And I think I want to talk about him just a little bit because I've been an Eckler defender. My spiel about Eckler has been he's not the typical 27 or 28-year-old running back because so much of his production comes from the passing game. He's not taking a pounding with a lot of rushes, although he is their best goal line guy, et cetera, right? And I'd still believe that's true, right? But I knocked him down from like 5'6", somewhere around there, and I have him now at 8. And what's interesting is Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator now, and you would think, oh, maybe that's good for Eckler. Yes, and no. So I saw this great video that Underdog did with Colt McCoy, breaking down what Kellen Moore does, and Kellen Moore has this phrase of like aggressively take what the defense gives you. And it's kind of weird, right? Like it's counterintuitive, like aggression, but take what they give you. And so it can lead to a lot of passes for Austin Eckler. But JJ Zacharyson in his one of his email newsletters looked at the target shares for Eckler when certain players were on the field, right? So like when Mike Williams was on, like his target share when neither Mike Williams or Keenan Allen were on the field was like huge, right? And then it dropped with Mike Williams. It dropped with when Keenan Allen was playing, and it dropped big time, like 10 percentage points to when they're both on the field, right? And now you add QJ in there, and an offensive coordinator that, as much as he aggressively takes what the defense gives you, does want to push it down the field, probably from what we know of his offenses. I think it's bad news for Eckler. So I think that guarantee of Eckler being like a redraft, like top 3 RB, I don't see it this year, right? So, as much as I've been a defender, I probably would want to move off some of my shares. I don't know how many I even have, but not much left. But if it's not in a situation where I'm competing, I am immediately moving off Austin Eckler.
No, I agree. Without his rushing upside, he's never rushed for 1,000 yards. His most carries is 206, which is decent. He's relied on touchdowns and receptions the last few years. So yeah, if QJ comes in and demands targets too, I agree. That's he's not. You're not drafting him for his rushing yards like you are Nick Chubb, and so.
Yeah. Hold on one sec. I just want to pull up the number because I think it's really striking. Hold on one second. I know this is compelling entertainment for people. Jameer, get Austin Eckler. All right. So let's see. His without both Williams and Keenan, his target share per game was 27.6. That's like huge for a running back, right?
Wide receiver one.
Yeah, when Allen played but Williams didn't, it was 22.6, right? When Williams played but Allen didn't, it was 20.3, right? So because I guess if you have that downfield target, you're going to use it. But when both wideouts were active, 12.9% target share per game. So that's almost 15 whole percentage points per game, of target share down when both of them are on the field. Now, of course, you can't bake injury into your predictions, but we do know that they have trouble staying on the field, so that
Yep.
may not be an issue. But I think all that, combined with how Kellen Moore wants to push it down the field, it's not looking very good for Austin Eckler.
No, I agree.
All right. Well, that just about does it for our off-season Fallers episode. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review on the Going for Two Live podcast audio feed. Please make sure you subscribe, like, comment, notifications, all that jazz here on the YouTube channel. Feed the algorithm. All right. So time for plugs. Josh, what do you got going on?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut, ROTONAUT. And mainly I've been tweeting about Ronald Acuna breaking baseball history this year. He's the first player to hit 30 home runs and 60 stolen bases in a season. And baseball's been around over 150 years. So anytime something's never been done, it's pretty impressive. So yeah, that's going on. You can find my rankings, especially redraft rankings. I'll have those up this next week on goingfor2.com.
Okay. I would have expected that somebody would have done that by now.
Well, some of the rule changes, they made bases a little bigger, less pickoffs, but still no one's even close to him in these stats. So it definitely does help, but he's also 25 years old and amazing. Yeah.
I left, I had 2 keeper baseball leagues that I left maybe a year and a half ago by now. Cause I don't have the time for it with all this football stuff.
It's a lot.
One of them I had Acuna and Vlad, I think. Yeah. Oof.
That'd be a good team.
Yeah.
Whoever you gave that team to is doing well.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, so you can find me on Twitter at @FFJunkie_. I might actually change my Twitter handle. I've been thinking about that lately. I don't know. Well, another conversation for another day. So rankings and articles on goingfor2.com. I might dabble in weekly redraft rankings this year. We'll see. We'll see what the schedule is like. But goingfor2.com has everything you need. Going for 2 live on the YouTube channel and has like a podcast, a show pretty much every day of the week. We're going to have our Sunday show coming back this season. Hop in our Discord. You can find a link to that in the little purple thing on the bottom right of goingfor2.com. There's all sorts of channels. It's free. DFS, best ball. I think there's some betting. Obviously, Dynasty. Some of our shows have a channel like us. It's great. It's huge. There's a lot of great advice and questions and conversations going on there. So please hop in. Next week, I'm not sure what we're doing. Maybe bold predictions. We'll see. But in 2 weeks, we will have Jacob Sanderson. We'll be talking about the lovely running back landscape in Dynasty Fantasy Football. I guess lovely is a word for it. But for now, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
Go Irish.
And go Ronald Acuna.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
Is he a junior, right? He's a junior, isn't he? Like Ronald Acuna Jr., right?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Right. Making Papa proud.